and say welcome to the last session of the last day of NedCamp 2018. Thanks for coming in to see this talk. The first time I ever presented this talk, I presented it at Pacific Northwest Drupal. So it's fitting that the last time I give the full version of this talk would be at a Drupal event. The very last time I'll give it this year will be as a lightning talk, condensed down to 10 minutes at WordCamp US in a couple weeks. But before we get to all that, so I'm Dwayne. I work at Pantheon, have been there for a while, but where this talk comes from is all of the sales training and all of the marketing training I took before I started working at Pantheon. And the stuff I learned along the way at the Pantheon as well, for sure. But that's what qualifies me to talk to you about how businesses run, as I talk to a lot of businesses in my life in sales. And to pick up some best practices along the way. So if you ever want to talk about anything else, I love karaoke. We went karaoke last night. It was a good time. Hopefully we'll go again tonight. Can't do enough karaoke. Or crochet. I love crochet as well. I make a lot of stuff. My slides for this and everything else I do are over on my website, mcdwayne.com. And if somebody could give me a hand with this next piece, I have a project going this year related to Twitter. I love Twitter so much. But I got a picture of me in front of a picture of me presenting every time I presented this year. So if somebody could take a portrait, or not portrait, landscape instead of portrait works best for this. I don't know how this is going to work because the projection and whatnot.
Back up, otherwise the shadows in your face.
All right, back up.
Back up a little more. Yeah, that's better.
Okay, cool. Thank you. I'm using you guys for tracking all this.
There we go.
Okay, cool. You can tweet that at me at MC Dwayne. I would be much grateful. Or just email it to me directly, or however you get it to me is fine. All right, enough of that silliness. I work at Pantheon. Does anybody here not know Pantheon? Awesome. We make things like multiple development environments pretty easy. And a bunch of automation hooks, and we have our command line. It's awesome. But there's only a few of us in the room because it's the last day, the last session. So I'm kind of curious, who you are and why you came in here. So there's only a few of us. Let's just go around real quick. Where are you from, and what's your role at your organization?
I'm a UX engineer at Move.
Okay, UX engineer.
Hi, my name is Gergely. I'm a co-founder of Chapters.
Cool. So co-founder, so you're running the business side of things?
Yeah, I used to be a developer, and I still do some development, but I have less and less time for that. So mostly I run the company instead of.
Awesome.
I'm Kelly Walton. I am a strategy director at Isavera, and this stuff is my jam.
Awesome. Go.
Go ahead. Oh, go ahead.
Either way.
So I'm Diane Schmidt. I'm from the developer Connecticut, and I'm a designer and developer who's now an owner of my own company. So yeah,
Okay.
This is the stuff that I
Excellent.
Nice, I'm Leslie, I'm from north of Boston, Massachusetts. I do a lot of project management, site building, and a lot of community volunteer stuff.
Adam, I work for Acquia. I'm one of the two main maintainers of the Lightning distribution.
Right on. So we got a very diverse crowd. Though there are not many in the physical room, but I think we're gonna have a good conversation out of this because that's what all this is derived out of. So I used to give a talk around discovery and dealing with multiple stakeholders. And one time giving this talk, it actually happened a couple times, but one time very pronounced. People said, well, a website kind of does this. And I said, not necessarily. And one time I was giving it in Baltimore specifically, and the guy raised his hand. He's like, yeah, but a website should unite all of the brand under one united messaging. And I'm like, I respectfully disagree. A website does what a website individually does. And half the room did this. And then the other half of the room kind of stared at me like they had never heard anybody say this ever in the history of the world. And I realized that there's a really good conversation that needs to happen here. Is one person right or wrong in this conversation? Maybe, maybe not. But the conversation needs to happen. There's a lot of ways up the mountain of being successful at doing web stuff. So that's what I'd really like to do is at the end, I don't have 45 minutes or an hour of material. I want to turn this into a healthy conversation, hear your opinions on some of these things, and I got some questions for you as well. Before we get to all that, to highlight why I think this is something to talk about and why this is an issue. Lunch was a while ago, and we sat through some interesting stuff. So, who wants a sandwich? Like, if I said, "Who wants a sandwich?" What's the main reason you would want to get a sandwich? Anybody? You're hungry. Exactly. So, if I said, "All right, well, you want a sandwich," and that is the definition of sandwich by all acceptable standards of Wikipedia, and then I handed you this, which is made out of plastic. Would you be happy with that sandwich based on that definition, but would you personally be happy with the sandwich? No, you wouldn't be happy. But what if I said, hey, I understand why not everybody likes cheese on a sandwich. We're going to pull the cheese off of there. Now are you happy with your sandwich? And we get right to the details of fine-tuning before we step back and say, we never solved the fundamental problem. You were hungry, not you wanted a sandwich. A sandwich that met this technical definition very, very well. And that's what a lot of my talks are about, is aligning expectations and results. And for the designers in the room, this is on purpose. I wanted it to say expectations and results, so I made it do it. Does it match? No. Does it bother you? Maybe. Doesn't bother me at all. But then again, my expectations for this slide were exactly that. The results matched exactly my expectations, so I'm happy with it. But if this goes off the rails, it gets like crazy quick when you can scare children by making them a red monster cake instead of like a Elmo or other copyrighted cartoon character. And this is all fun. There's nothing that disastrous about messing up a kid's cake. They'll be scarred for life. But when we start talking about real projects where people gave us actual money to do a real thing that they expected to do something for them that would make them money, they get angry really quick. And as people get angry, they get very vocal. People that really are excited about what you're doing occasionally will say something nice about it. Someone that has tangentially ever touched your project that it messes up, they will be very vocal on Twitter, I guarantee it. Or GitHub or anywhere else they can get a voice. And the problem with that is that reputation spreads really fast. So it's very easy to get a bad reputation, even if you yourself have never done anything that causes other people hardship in this. It's the reputation we all carry. And I don't know if there's a global way to fix that everyone's going to judge every developer by the worst developer experience they've ever had. That's just kind of human nature. Like, if I bite into a pear for the first time in my whole life and that pear is terrible, I'm going to think all pears are terrible until someone gives me an awesome pear that I can actually have a comparison to. And that's what I think a lot of people go through. There's 168 or so million businesses in the world that don't have web experiences at all. So them getting on for the first time is often a terrible ordeal. And they spread the word. But, mom and pop shops that never had a web experience, that's not really going to affect us. I mean, globally it will. But where it really actually hits us are very large projects. This is a real quote from a friend of mine in Silicon Valley who worked on what originally started as a $250,000 project and then ballooned up pretty rapidly by the time it got done. It finished under $1 million, but said, Dwayne, he was drunk when he said this, said, Dwayne, they don't take their fiduciary responsibility seriously. We pay them good money to figure out how to make the best websites going to meet our needs, and then they don't even know how to figure out what we're trying to do. This is a paraphrase, but that bothered me immensely when he said that. I thought, And then it dawned on me. What he was actually describing is the process of he thought he hired a developer, and the developer thought, this is what they hired me to do. I'm going to make code work, and I'm going to get the website up, and I'm going to make sure that uptime monitoring is there, and I'm going to make sure that it's fast, and that's what I'm going to do. And what that person that hired that team, what they really thought they were buying was this. And there's a miscommunication between the expectation and the results. When you think you hired this and you really only hired this part, you're in for a bad time. That's worse than the Elmo cake, because this was a lot more expensive than an Elmo cake. Like a lot. So from time to time, it's really a good idea to step back from any problem and look at the big picture. Like, what are we actually trying to do here? Because if I'm just trying to fix your sandwich, I am never going to solve your hunger problem because that sandwich was plastic. But if I step back and say, well, I'm not designing a sandwich, I'm designing a food delivery vehicle, oh, that's an entirely different matter. An entirely different system. There's entirely different things to worry about. So I like this quote to remind me to do that occasionally. And that's what I think we really need to do here to fix this problem globally, is if we can rely on a process that's well understood, that everybody already kind of implements. No matter who you are, you have a process. It might not be a well-documented process, it might not be a good process, but you have a process. And all processes for any business, for any project, for any sale, kind of work like this. It's kind of global. There's a big bucket of things that are possible in the universe called leads. So if I got business cards from all of you, I would have all of your contact information. You are a possible person I could talk to. And then we go through this process of qualification where I figure out if you need and can afford the thing that I am selling, and do you want to buy it, and if I should spend any more time with you at all. So sending you all an email, that's a low-cost effort. No one writes me back, then I'll assume you didn't self-qualify and might have to do some more digging and some more work to push it through the system. But that's who I want to work with, the people that say, hey, I wanted that. Those are the easiest sales. Those are the best sales. Those are the best clients. And then you go through, with those folks, a round of discovery to figure out what exactly they want. Have a whole other set of talks about that. What exactly do they actually need? What will actually solve the problem? And then you write that into a proposal, go through a procurement process, deliver that, then you loop through a maintenance back to the beginning. This is true if you're in sales. This is the sales funnel pipeline. It's true of project pipeline, but instead of money being the driver, it's amount of time and authority and need to actually do the thing internally. It's true of pretty much anything. There's a process of the things we could do, things we actually could do, things we should do, and then the details of how we get those things done. I'm a firm believer in the process. I think process can solve a lot of problems if we just pick one and stick with it and run with that. One of my favorite books in the whole world was written by the Sandler Institute called "You Can't Teach a Kid to Ride a Bike at a Seminar." And it's very true. Like, I can explain to you any theory of any business practice ever in the history of the world in detail all day long, and it will mean nothing to you until you actually implement it. Until you actually go through and actually implement the thing. Do you find how it actually works? And then you learn what it actually is. So, what I'm going to focus on for really the rest of this is how we can hook into the qualification process, part of the process, which is really early on, automate the thing with a little bit of know-how and a little bit of just firm process in place to make the whole rest of that really easy. Well, easier. But more importantly, to not waste our time qualifying people one by one. Not spending our time saying, okay, let's dig into the details of what's wrong with this sandwich before we really step back and say, what do you actually want? What are we actually doing here? And that's where I think the qualification process really shines. It's like, what are you actually trying to do? Do I actually want to do that? Can you actually pay me to do that? So in sales, and I'm going to use the sales model for most of this, you have this thing called BANT, which is really nice shorthand: budget, authority, need, time frame. You need these four things. Every salesperson in the world kind of knows this. If you don't have a budget, then why am I talking to you? If you can't actually sign the check, I don't want to talk to you. So put me in touch with the person who can. Timeline, is that doable or not? If it's an 18-month sales cycle and we got 2 weeks to do this thing, going to happen. And then need, and this is where the fallacy that all sales guys or salespeople should fall into, I think. If you're talking to me, you need my product. That's how that works. Like, otherwise you wouldn't be talking to me. There's a lot of other checklists you can use. BANT is by far the most well adopted, but Scotsman is what I learned. I think it's a little better it's a little more specific. But you notice, like, need is there in all of these. Need, money, all the basics are there. But if we're going to turn our qualification process into a machine, where, think about machines, they're automated. We turn them on and then we just let them run, and then we just look at the output from them. We don't need to worry about how it did what it did unless it doesn't work. If we're going to get to this point, then we really need to drill in on these questions. And do you have a budget? That's a pretty straightforward yes or no. Do you have a deadline to get this done by? That's a yes or no question. They do or they don't, and they can tell you what that is if they do. Do you have the authority to do this? That's a little murkier, but it's pretty straightforward. If they're the VP of sales hiring you to do a thing, or VP of marketing hiring you to do a thing, they pretty much have authority. If it is the intern, this summer's intern asking you to do a thing, you might want to double check if they have authority or not. You can derive that pretty quickly. Need is actually the hardest one. And it's the one that every salesperson I've ever met kind of skips over. But it's the most important of all of them. A need, if it's really a need, it means they are going to get a goal done. And that sounds like a minor semantical shift, and it is. But goals are easy to write, if you write them correctly. There's this wonderful system called SMART goals. I didn't invent this, I stole this from a slide on the internet. Time bound, well, we already took care of that in the other one. Specific, well, that means they can actually articulate what they're trying to do. Relevant, that's a iffy one. Is it relevant to you? Well, if you're doing the project, it is. Attainable and measurable, interrelated. Can we actually get done the thing, and how will we know when we attained it? Because we're going to measure it. So really, of all of these, the one that you can always rely on, and if it's not there, you have problems, is M. What the heck are we going to measure? Lord Kelvin here said, if you can't measure it, you can't improve it. That's a paraphrase, but basically what he said. Guy that invented the Kelvin scale. So we need actual something to measure, actually numbers that we can say yes or no, on or off. Because we can't get to a point where we agree on paper with math, this is true or this is not true, then you get to the argument that they're not happy. And you can't measure happiness. You just can't. There's no scale where a client will objectively say, I am happy, and that's agreeable to everyone. What you can say is the header at the top uses generic CSS green. We did that. Yes, it is green. Well, marketing and everything else in the entire ecosystem has this concept underlying it, whether you realize it or not. The key performance indicators. Did the number click to 2, or is the number still at 1? At the simplest terms, that's all a key performance indicator is. It's a fancy marketing term to say, we did it or we didn't. In the most basic terms, I like to use my laptop for example of this, and it's kind of hard to see, I guess, with the light on it, but can you see if my monitor or my laptop is on? How can you tell it's on? Yeah, the key performance indicator for my laptop being on from that view is the apple's lit up. That's it. That's the simplest terms. I can check that box, and yes, I can check it, and everyone can objectively agree that is true. And that's what we want to get to with KPIs. So in a perfect world, setting up a band system, we would just go ahead and ask directly to their face, hey, what are your KPIs? Where have you written those down? And if you ever ask someone this, and they say, oh, I'm glad you asked, here's my spreadsheet, and here's the timeline for all of these. Work with them. They know what they're doing, and that is going to be maybe not the best project in the world, maybe they're microcontrolling everything, there's a lot of other unknown factors, but as far as they know what they want, run with them. They know what they're doing. But you're probably never going to ask this directly. If you get a chance, do. It's fun, but I wouldn't put this on an intake form. But if they do know, just go to discovery immediately. Just like, all right, you are fully qualified. Even if you can find budget for this thing, you know what you're doing so well, I have no trouble with that. Anyway, but if you ask them hey, what are we trying to do here? What's your KPIs? And they look completely confused. Well, actually, I guess I put those in the wrong order. Sorry, I've been playing with these slides the other night. You just ask them, well, okay, you don't know what I'm talking about with KPIs. Great. What are we trying to measure here? What's the thing we're trying to get done? What do you care about that we're trying to measure? And if they still look confused, if they start explaining it, if someone says, hey, what are we trying to measure? It's like, oh, measure. We need to get 30% more leads by the end of February. Okay, that's an easy thing to measure. Is that the only thing we're trying to measure here? Okay, that's good. We want to get 1,000 more new users a month onboarded onto the system. Okay, that's a great number. But if you ask them, like, what are you trying to get done here? It's like, I need to sell more books. All right, what does that mean? It's like, well, I write these books about, you can kind of almost write them off at that point, because they don't know what they're trying to do. And at that point, you can change your hat, and you can put on one of the other hats and say, all right, I'm going to be a business analyst from here on out, and you're going to pay me to be a business analyst, which is fine if you want to do so. And then you're going to walk them down this path of like, well, let's figure out what we can measure and what you want to measure. But understand that's a very, very different thing than developing a website. Now you're developing their business to a point where they can understand what their business does and metrics they can actually agree on. Completely different science. So what you walk them through is like, all right, we all pretty much should be in agreement that these are good things to measure, other than maybe, and so on. But Google Analytics stuff, these are good things to measure, right, with websites, right? Okay, oh, good. Because I Googled KPIs for websites, and this is what comes up, among other things. All right, the serious problem, though, that like you have to guide them through and see is like, all right, well, these metrics that I care about, that I can deliver to you pretty easily with all my metrics and tools I got in place, is that really what your marketing team cares about? Like, you're trying to measure like cost per lead and Brown marketing ROI and other things that Google told me were marketing KPIs when I Googled it. The problem, furthermore, is that sales cares about a different set of numbers altogether. Some of these overlap, I'm sure of it. But ultimately, the person who cuts the check at the end of the day, the execs who actually care, who have to actually go to the board and say, this is what we did with your money, investors, and here's how we're planning to get it back. They care about a whole other set of numbers. Now, the really good news in all of this is once it's just numbers on paper, you can start doing the math to figure out how those numbers are derived and how they're interrelated. This is a complete field of science unto itself that I am not going to claim that I know anything about. I once tried to learn the R language and gave up because I said, I'm never going to use this directly. But it looks interesting. It's all just a bunch of equations that look generically something akin to this. Do not use this in production. But this is what you're driving at. Again, with your business analyst hat on to the person who's like very confused about what they're doing. Like, hey, we got to figure out what in all of this you actually care about and how we can map that back to things that I can measure and deliver to you. Again, completely different thing than delivering a website. You're delivering them the system that will let them know if they are done or not. And ultimately, there'll be a giant old thing. What's in fashion right now is something called OKRs, objective and key results, which is your overarching KPI for the entire organization at once. I hear I listed as business owner goals because OKR is the fashion of the day, and business owner goals will always be in fashion. And KPIs have been around for a while. But say, this is how we're going to map all of this stuff together. And now that we can measure it, what are we actually going to do? But the question is, do you want to change hats? You might not. But know that you're changing hats. If you want to buy one of my pieces of crochet, I will sell it at a reasonable cost. $20, $30 for a hat, and more for that for the scarf. I don't actually sell them, but if you offered me money, I would probably say, okay. Mostly give them away. But if you want me to spend that same amount of time building a web thing for you, those rates are like $150 an hour to start. And it's going to take me 10 hours to do this thing to make like a really nice scarf. But I'm not going to sell a scarf for $8,000. Just, it doesn't work. But know that you were changing hats and that different hat change might involve a different rate change. And if they explain that and they're cool with it, go for it, and if you want to do it. Otherwise, you might want to farm it out. Can't tell you how to run your business. But these are best practices. I see a lot of people that have gotten in trouble over the years because they're trying to switch hats and charge the same rate, or changing hats and they don't realize they're changing hats. And now they're a web developer who's trying to solve a business problem by being a business consultant for the same rate that they're charging for being a web developer. And that causes all sorts of havoc. Business analysts is the one I pick on the most, because I think most businesses you talk to don't really know how they work. They know how their product works, but they don't know how their business runs. A good business analyst will tell them that pretty quickly. How about some of these other pieces? Well, a very simple lead-in question. What's your plan around, and then fill in the blank. So maybe in your qualification process, before you get into like all the weeds of like, do I want to change hats? Like, hey, what's your plan around, business planning? Like, how's your business planning work? And if they say, I don't have a business planning project pipeline or way to do that properly, well, then change your hat. No, I can help you with that. But it's just as easy to slot in, what's your content strategy? Number one way I've gotten out of work. I am not kidding. I have had so many people ask me, hey, can you help me build a website? And my first question back, if they're asking me personally, is like, what's your content strategy? And then I can look at a blank stare and explain what a content strategy is. And so far, only one person's ever come back months later with a content strategy figured out. And that was my sister, and I built her a website, and it's still running, and it's looking pretty good. She actually just changed her content strategy and approved it with me, and that was kind of an awesome feeling to like, that's a good idea. Change it up. But how many people have ever worked on anything and they're just like, oh yeah, just throw the content in there, and they don't give you a link to anything? And yeah, we've all been there. That's why I stopped doing projects if they didn't have this figured out, because I'm not writing content for you. I write content for myself. Design services, you probably don't want me designing things. As you can tell from the slide deck, I borrow a lot from other sources. And it's good enough is good enough for me, as we saw from my expectations results slide. But design services might be something that you think is really awesome. But again, are we bundling that service with the web delivery? Is it design and development together? If you want to bundle those things, that's cool. There's no right or wrong to that, but know that that's what you're doing. And know that you're setting up the expectation for the future for every other web developer they ever work with the whole history of the rest of their lives. That if the first person they work with bundled in content strategy and design services just as part of the package, they will assume you were doing these things. So if you spell it out for them in the qualification process early on, and they realize like, whoa, there's a lot of things that you want me to pay you to do, rather than, oh, you got a website for X amount of money, they'll self-select out a lot quicker. Project management. This is an interesting one. I got a chance to be a project management role this year for the first time. Like, I've unofficially done it a lot, but like actually a PM role internal to Pantheon. And I learned so much so fast. One of the things that made me really appreciate is how separate this job is from anything else. And if you don't expect it to be separate and you're just going to like roll along a process, you'll end up being the project manager and chasing everyone down and not having a plan. It's up to you if you want to do that, but know that that is time and money that you are sinking in, time and resources you're sinking in to go chase them down to do a thing, versus they have a project manager who's spending their time and effort chasing you down for things, which in a perfect world will go really easy. But it's up to you how you do this. I don't have a slide for it, but one of my favorite times of giving this talk, and someone said, well, how they implemented this was they have a very long intake form. And to do work with them, you can send them an email, and she will send you back a link to the intake form. It's literally 20 questions long that ask a bunch of questions like this, very specific. And it's the first sign if they're serious or not. If they're serious, they will fill it in. If they're serious, they will know the answers to most of those questions, or be honest with you. Say, I haven't really thought about this. Can you consult with us on this? Consulting for a discovery phase is perfectly fine to do. There's nothing wrong with that. There's also nothing wrong with scaring off people that don't have any money and are just going to kick tires and waste your time. Because if you just want to do this, just want to be a dev that just works on code and delivers that code, and you don't want to be involved in design, you don't want to be involved in content, you don't want to be involved in project management, you shouldn't have to be. There's a lot of people that do those roles, but it's up to you. If you want to focus just on doing that, just focus on that. And that's the question you have to ask yourselves, and that's actually one of the conversations I want to get into, is like, why have you chosen the path you're on, and how are you doing what you're doing, and how many hats are you wearing? Because again, the goal of the website just like anything else, is not like a be-all, end-all. There's one thing it does. There's not one thing a developer should ever have to do. There's not one thing a freelancer or a small agency should ever do. Because nobody wants that. They want the results of a team working together effectively. They want the results of a website that delivers the actual thing it was supposed to do, which is deliver the KPIs. The part we're supposed to clap with Picard. For the you can actually clap. This is a recording. All right, they clapped. You couldn't hear it on the recording. But I'm Dwayne. I work at Pantheon. So thanks. Now I want to turn into the conversation. So the qualifications questions I kind of started mapping out with this. So first I will take any active questions. Let's see, time check. Yep, right on time. 30 minutes for delivery. Time check. Or not time check, sorry, that's what I just did. So questions first on anything I said. I'm happy to clarify anything, but I'm not the expert here. Collectively, you have more knowledge in your head about this subject than I could possibly have, because just from the fact there's more of you that have been doing this stuff for a while. And then I have some questions for you. And then I would love to have an actual dialogue conversation with everybody. So first questions? Heather.
So I've yet to get to work for an agency that was actually well organized. So with that,
Step back.
where in the rate scale of things, I would imagine business strategy would be more price-wise, higher, because it's your knowledge and intellect and accumulated volume, but am I right in that?
In my experience, it's all over the map.
Okay.
I've never met two business analysts that agreed on that. It depends on what you mean by a business analyst as well. A lot of this is determined by. So the question, real quick, is what the rate scale, what is a developer time worth versus business analyst time worth? And it depends on the project too. In the WordPress world, your average developer makes $70 to $75 an hour. Drupal world, it's 200, I think. Somewhere the national average is between 150 and 225, somewhere in there. So it just depends on the project. So in a WordPress project, it would seem inconceivable that, hey, we're going to spend $3,000 on this website project total to bust out any money whatsoever for a business analyst. If it's $1 million project, obviously you need to invest that time, whatever, and resources to get it done. But as far as the individual rate, that really depends on the individual service provider, in my experience. Does anybody else have thoughts on that? Has anyone here actually paid a business analyst to help them with their business ever?
I've seen it come across myself, and usually business analysts are there's no one under 150.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're right. They're paying for the experience to guide them, because hopefully, if you're paying a business analyst, they have a proven track record of building businesses. Otherwise, why are you hiring them? All right. So I know I had a few other people join. We got through earlier and said where we're from, what our general rules are, but does anyone here actually sell projects to clients and work with clients directly as they sell? All right, we have two people right here. Awesome. What are your thoughts on paid discovery? Either of you first.
We like it. I mean, it's definitely, you can, without it, you spend a lot of time, you can either spend a lot of time for free, or you can spend a lot of time blowing the budget of the project so you know what you're supposed to do. So one of the things we recommend, especially when we get in front of a client that doesn't really know what they're doing, as you alluded to earlier, or maybe isn't really sure what they want out of the website, that's the first thing we say is we can't, because what did they say to us? They're how much is this going to cost?
Yeah.
And I'm I don't know.
It's a good answer.
I said, but if you pay us a little bit, we'll sit down and talk to you for a while, and that'll help us figure out what's going to cost.
And the people that will pay it are at least willing to engage, put some skin in the game, as that old saying goes. And the people that don't, you don't work with.
Right.
How about you before we move on to the next question?
Yeah, years ago, no. Now, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Just because of that, the projects, so many people also either have sites currently,
Mm-hmm.
and they're well, it's not working. And of course, then the question is, what? and that's well, that's what we need to talk about. And yes, recharging, you're going to pay to talk.
Very good. How often does that backfire where you do a paid discovery and then realize by the end, like, I cannot help you? Does that ever happen?
Depends. I've worked for places that will never say no, and I've worked for places that will walk away. So it
Okay.
really depends.
Alright. So, next question is internal project folks, people that work on projects internally to their own companies. Do you do your own round of discovery beyond just taking the work order? Like sometimes there's the jobs that you come in and like get the CSS fixed on this page because it's doing this. And then you just do that. And then you get like, we need this functionality, and that's the entire thing. I know the different organizations range all over the board. I've had a couple of conversations about Mike Miles about this, like, and what they do at Genuine. So I'm curious, does anyone like have like their own internal, like, I'm gonna go have to have this round of discovery to understand what's actually going on before I actually do this thing. Not pushing back and saying, no, I'm not doing it, but like, I need to understand the project better before I launch into any kind of dev work. Anybody here do that? You do? Okay.
Actually, my business partner has a psychology background, so that usually comes in very handy.
Anybody else? Nobody else does. Highly recommend looking into it. It's a little bit of a time sink. Go ahead.
We do. Well,
Oh, you do?
we but, Gertie can talk.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Well, there's a difference in roles, but, so yeah, I mean, we've been in all these situations where we've funded the discovery ourselves.
Mhm.
We've even funded, it really was client dependent in the size of the potential project where we funded even part of the solution ourselves.
It depends. I mean, sometimes we work with or we talk to potential customers who already have a vendor, and we're trying to get our foot in the door. And in those cases, they usually don't want to pay for someone else to come in and provide a solution for a problem. And we just do it for free to prove that it's we're worth their time. So, yeah.
And it's worked well.
Related question to all discovery. If you have a return client, do you do paid discovery the second time around and the nth time around? Do you still go through the exact same process? Like the first time you intake a client makes total sense. I think paid discovery is the way to go from all the conversations I've had. But that's where I'm a little fuzzy from a lot of people is like, when they loop back around, do you need to do this full-blown discovery and qualification? Because they've already paid you once. They've already proved they can pay the net 90.
I mean, it depends on, it depends on what the next thing is. I mean, if it's a whole new batch of functionality and it's gonna have a whole new business purpose and everything, yeah, it's treated like a new project.
Yeah, we do the same thing.
Okay.
I got a related question because,
Sure.
like, when you guys talk to a client, do you separate that discovery process out? Whereas I feel like we just, once we engage, we just start,
So what
let's
I
really keep building. You understand?
So I'll answer it the way I think I heard it, and then you can clarify if I heard it wrong. So what I learned, I went through Sandler, and I see everything from the eyes of the salesperson still. That there is a hard-coded line between each of the steps, between those parts. Like discovery is completely sealed off from making a proposal. Those are completely separate things. You have to finish one before you can do the other. And once you're into the next phase, you can't go back. You can only go back by starting over again. So if we get to a point in the sales process where I'm writing procurement and you're like pushing back on me and saying, whoa, we need to like negotiate this, that means I did discovery wrong. That means I need to go back all the way to the beginning, make sure I'm talking to the right person, make sure they actually still have budget, because it's probably been a while, and then go through discovery again. It might be faster, but that's how I approach it. Is that what you were asking?
Yeah, well, I mean, sometimes, yeah, so that's partial answer. Sometimes, I don't think we have quite such a hard line.
Mhm.
There's the budget, which we budgeted for discovery in, but we may not have presented it because there's a lot of times there's going to be pushback on the discovery phase.
Mhm.
But if it's not as demarcated as you say, it tends to be, and you're solving a problem that they have, and it hurts them, they tend to ask less questions about where the resources are being allocated.
Mhm. I'd love to hear anybody else's thoughts on that subject.
So you say you fold the cost of discovery into all your work, basically? I mean, you still get paid for the work, but you kind of like just say.
Well, we don't fold, yeah, I mean, I guess we just fold it less, so it's obfuscated, it's like, oh, here, and then we just put it here. I just think that where these hard lines that he was talking about, we don't necessarily always have. We focus on what's the solution, what's the problem. And once we've convinced them that we have the skill set to do it, then there isn't that fight. I mean, we just went through this with a client where we convinced them that we could solve these problems and price and how that budget was allocated with development, discovery, and everything.
Yeah, this isn't gonna pick up
Became less
anymore.
of an issue, or wasn't an issue.
Also, in some cases, when we do discovery and we actually have to solve a problem that we are not very familiar with, we have to do some, actually we write some code, we even get to like, we create the solution to some to a certain extent. And in that case, we are not going to sell that to the client. We hope that they will hire us to deliver the solution, and then of course we will bill for that, let's say 25% that we've already done of the solution, but not. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting approach. We've had projects with paid discovery. We kind of take a different, we'll have, there's maybe an RFP out there, and well, we can't give you a quote for this, but what we could do is if you, for X amount of money, we'll put together we'll do a discovery and then do a proposal based on the discovery, with the condition that, if you can take this is a roadmap that you can take, to anywhere to shop out to anyone, and we'll do a proof of concept, and we'll figure out how, this might work and everything like that. And we're like, okay, so we did this, and here's what we think it would take to build out the rest. Here's the report, and here's how we did it. And we're very open about it, and we haven't always gotten the work. Maybe they take that and shop it on to someone else that's going to do it cheaper because we figured it out for them. But we also got paid for our time, so we're not like, well, that sucked. We would rather have had a bigger project, but, that's sometimes the way the cookie crumbles. But I would rather have done that than have done all that work and then have them go shop it out and give it to somebody else, and then we're sitting there with nothing. So,
Yeah. I think it was a really good point. And there's a lot of trust built with that too. That you did the right thing by them, and the next project that does fit, they're probably going to come back. I trust people that are just straight up honest with me. Who don't like the news they give you at the time. So last question from me, and then we'll wrap it up here. Don't hold you all day, and we've got a party to get to. Is I'm curious to what your qualification process looks like. How do you route out the tire kickers? Is there any tricks or tips that you've picked up over the years where it's worked exceptionally well for what you're doing? And that includes internal as well. You should be able to tell the difference between an intern asking for redirect changes and the VP of marketing asking for something major, for instance. All right, that was not a question. So anybody's thoughts on that?
I'll just say it's very much my work in progress.
Say?
It is very much my work in progress.
Work in progress? Okay.
The one thing I did hear from this kind of interesting, you said before, and it kind of came up with actually the word came up over the summer, with Tara Johnson, who's actually has a qualification form.
Mm-hmm.
She was great. But it was being boss ladies on a podcast, and it was one of the things that came up was if the person can't describe to you what the purpose of their business is,
Yeah.
that's probably a really good time to be like, you know what, I think we need to find somebody else to work with.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually had to apply it to one of my existing current clients, and because that's been our process, is trying to get her to define what, she's already got everything there, but she getting that definition out of what is our true end goal here has become, and we kind of started to back off a little bit to go, when you're ready.
Yeah.
Right now, we're not putting our time and efforts there because of that.
And how long does that conversation normally take?
Not too long, because I think she's actually pretty sensitive. She used to be an executive, so she's like aware. This is also her first time being solo.
Mhm.
So, but it's definitely a little bit it's a pain point.
Yeah.
So, because no one likes to be like, I'm the one who's holding it up, you know?
And ultimately, that's what a good qualification process should be doing, is a very quick get you to a no. There's a saying in sales, give me a no immediately.
Yeah.
Or I can get the yes long it takes to get the yes, but I need to know now.
Yeah.
And so you want to disqualify people from your process pretty quick. Does anyone here, so any other thoughts on that before I further refine?
And we do, I think we're pretty good at like doing a technical assessment, but then maybe the KPI assessment is something that is a growing process for us too, I think, because I feel like sometimes we're excited to try a challenge and to, you know, we like the technical work, we're very data-driven in our company, and just being able to measure that at the end is something you want to be sure you're doing, so that at the end of the day, we didn't just build something we think is cool, but that they think is cool.
Yeah, I like that. That's definitely, if they think it's cool, then they'll pay for it.
Well, right, you know, we can think it's as cool as anything, but if they're like, what's this do? Like, that doesn't matter to me, then you fail.
And that's such a truth in what we do, like especially at a camp like this where there's so many cool talks about so many awesome things. Like I'm learning React right now, and I want to make React do everything.
Exactly, this is the problem.
And end user doesn't care. End user knows that the thing happens when you hit the thing.
Yeah.
That's about all the technical knowledge they need to have.
Right.
If it's truly implemented well, it shouldn't matter. Like it just should seamlessly be under it, but how much work you took to get there is a completely different story. But a good qualification process should alleviate all of the time from qualification off of your shoulders and automate and offload all of that. So you spend all your time in discovery or lower, because those are things you can't automate. You cannot automate the discovery process. You can automate parts of it, you can shorten it, you can standardize it, but that still takes human back and forth. Qualification, I don't really think does at a certain level. When you're first starting out, if you gotta be scrappy and you gotta go out and you gotta force people through it, yes, they should be doing that. You should be taking the small jobs as quick as you can and learning along the way. But after a point, the successful agencies have an intake process that requires some skin in the game. To get to a paid discovery, what do you have to do? What do you have to prove to me that you can actually pay this thing and not just anybody that throws me $2,000, I will give 4 hours of my time meaninglessly. Both of those go to a different end result for you. And that actually goes back to knowing what your business does. If your client is a problem because they can't tell you what their business does and they need a business consultant, in all fairness, you should be able to say, this is what my business does and here's the paths I'm taking to get there. And if you can't, well, maybe it's time to step back and think about what you're doing. Nothing wrong with it. Not saying anybody's doing nothing wrong. You're all doing awesome. But except for that guy. That's only because you didn't move earlier. Nothing else. You were so embedded you couldn't move down. No, I'm kidding. You're all doing great. But it's all learning. There's nobody's like perfect on any of this stuff, and I am for sure not the expert on any of this stuff. But it's one of the lessons I learned over the time, and I like having this conversation. So with that, I'll say I'll wrap it up unless anybody else wants to talk about anything else while we're in the room. Otherwise, we'll move the conversation to the hallway. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.